Hello, what is up, everybody? My name is Mario Pichardo. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about this story out of the Daily Star. It says cops using Minority Report predictive policing could see innocent citizens framed. Here, the subtitle reads Police forces across Britain are using the Minority Report style computer program to predict where and when crime will happen. The innocent people are being targeted. So, this story is pretty concerning. I mean, just by reading that, the police should not be deciding um, who's committing crimes before they commit the crime. On one side, it totally makes sense because you get it, and you're like, okay, if I was a cop, I want to make sure that I make that neighborhood as safe as I can. If I can catch crime before it happens, that'd be great because then there's no victim. It makes less work for us. It's a better deterrent, absolutely, for crime. And so it makes sense from that angle. And yet, from the other angle, when we're talking about real societies, real neighborhoods, it's very scary to be a person who lives in this neighborhood where a person doesn't even have to have evidence against you. They can arrest you because you thought about it. And then it's like, well, um, what are the patterns and what are the patterns that I have to avoid? And it creates this society where it really becomes very, very authoritarian. The people lose so much of their privacy, they lose so much of their rights in that regard. And I wouldn't want to live in that kind of society. It just sounds dystopian. It sounds Orwellian, straight out of something straight out of the 1984. And so the coverage here kind of says essentially the same thing. So it says predictive policing computer programs use algorithms to analyze huge amounts of police data to identify patterns and make predictions about crime. These programs also learn over time and become more autonomous when making predictions without having to be programmed. There are two types of predictive policing: predictive mapping programs and individual risk assessment programs. And so then it goes on to talk more and more about it. Um, the interesting note is that that they mention here also in the article is that, well, results in this thing over policing, because what ends up happening is that if they find any crime and they kind of trace, the algorithm goes through its trace and finds out where more people of a specific um, ethnic background, for example, you have Latinos, Hispanics, and blacks, and um, it kind of targets these minority groups because it's found that, well, these people are involved in a lot of crime, therefore there must be a lot of crime around where they are, where they live, or something similar to that effect. And so what ends up happening is you kind of get these kind of skewed numbers towards people who have previously committed a crime because they're just like, oh, well, this person's black, he lives in a black neighborhood, therefore there must be higher crime. And so you get more police there, and naturally you get more arrests, you get more uh, and so these numbers kind of get inflated and it feeds itself. And so it's like, okay, we send more people to this black neighborhood, we got even more arrests, and so it's definitely the black people who are committing the crime, so let's send even more. And now you have a super over policed area where people are just scrutinizing anything that, for example, a black person would do. Where just as easily, if I went into another neighborhood of a different ethnic group, I could potentially find the same or similar numbers of crimes. It's just the fact that I'm searching through this black neighborhood. So it kind of becomes a thing of like uh, it's a self fulfilling prophecy where you go there, you expect to find crime there, and so you do. People get arrested who otherwise wouldn't be arrested if not for this software, and so it's like it's interesting. I mean, you really get it from both sides. I mean, there's a real privacy concern. And I think there's a very good reason for citizens to kind of stand up and say this isn't okay. We're not going to stand by this. But you could also see why the police would want to implement this, but you need to let them know. I think, especially if I lived in Britain, it's this is not something that we want. This isn't something that serves our interests. We understand that as police officers, this could be useful to you, but we think that it's a detrimental, kind of slippery slope for the real freedoms of the British people. But I'm not exactly sure what the benefit of this would be in a society over the long term. Um, I think a lot of people would be a lot more distrusting of the police, and for good reason. You don't want to have to deal with this whole predictive thing. You don't know how it works. You don't know how the algorithm works. You don't know if you'll be targeted just because you eat a bologna sandwich on the street on Tuesday, and it just so happens that that's usually when criminals, when there's a high percentage of criminals who commit crime right after they do certain these kind of weird data points, because there's always like weird kind of connections that you can make. Like, okay, it's Tuesday. I bought, I don't know, a Gillette razor. Um, Everybody 17% of people who do that same activity on the same day at this day of the month at this time tend to commit more crimes. I don't know, something like that. They always have like these weird data points that connect things that you'd never think were connected in terms of a pattern, but they're able to do that. And so, well, you don't want to be someone who's policed more just because you kind of hit those data points. You could never have thought of ever committing a crime in your life, and then you just end up being followed by like cop cars or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen because that sounds crazy, but that is really the kind of rabbit hole you go down when you're talking about algorithms and big data and feeding in historical information and things like that. This is kind of the direction you go down. And so I prefer not to see this kind of technology rolled out. Um, it talks here more about those minorities and minorities losing their really dealing with a brunt of this kind of technological jump. Sure, will it catch some people who were going to commit crimes? Absolutely. But I think it also catches people who otherwise are completely innocent and wouldn't have done anything. I mean, we get it just here from the subtitle of the article, that innocent people are getting in trouble because of this kind of technology. And you really have to wait. I mean, the whole idea of the law is that the law has to be broken for someone to be charged with something. You can't just arrest people because they've thought about committing a crime until they actually commit a crime, and then you can prove it in law. But then again, this is in Britain, so I'm not going to say that, like for example, the American innocent until proven guilty also works in that case. I'm not actually sure how the law enforcement works over there, but just as a kind of general rule, to have any kind of government law enforcement to decide that you've committed a crime or that you may commit a crime and therefore I'm going to arrest you before you've done it is really insane. It's even worse than having your back watched constantly, but to get arrested even before is pretty insane. So I just want to talk about this article. I hope that this gets more coverage because it's really actually pretty Orwellian. It's very nightmarish in that whole context, and it's just one of those things that I think we have to deal with. It's something that will come out of AI. I'm sure we'll see a lot of things that are similar because we have to understand we're starting to get technology that can mimic a lot of jobs that used to be occupied by humans. We have machines now that can actually diagnose what disease a patient might have more accurately than a doctor can. I was reading that article a little while ago. And so, well, if that's true, then what does this mean for all of those other occupations that aren't anywhere near as demanding as a doctor's? And the simple fact that, well, a doctor has to study for 12 years or something like that, 12, 15, 18, however many years it is, to have their job. And a machine is able to do that job better than they are in some capacities. And it's like, well, what does this mean then when AI really advances? I mean, we're starting to see truck drivers lose their jobs. We're starting to see technology that can do things that we never would have otherwise been able to do. But what is when all of this comes to a close and we get AI that can really intelligently answer complicated questions in the blink of an eye that would take a person 20 or 30 years to develop an answer for, well, then what does that mean for human labor? What are people going to do for their jobs? I mean, it's almost as if we're building technologies to replace ourselves into a world where, well, there won't really be much of an economy. There won't be many jobs. Everybody will have to become a serf or something similar because there's just a very low necessity for certain jobs, for certain patterns or places of work. Because when you think of AI, the whole idea of AI is for a robot to mimic the human kind of thought process or, thinking ability. And so if we give that over to robots, well, then there's very little outside of maybe spirituality that a robot can't do really better than any human can. Because you could even talk about, well, the physical nature of humans, and we're already starting to see robots that can kind of mimic that. And then that's really a small problem by comparison to the problem that will emerge, which is that what are we going to do? How are we going to feed ourselves? How are we going to we're kind of moving closer and closer to, and I really don't want to think about it or say it, but a socialistic or communist society simply as a result of technological revelations or innovations or things. If you guys like this video, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so that you're notified the next time we post a video that goes live. And yeah, so with that, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Take it easy. Peace.